Throughout the nearly 35 years The Simpsons has been on the air, they've had hundreds of guest stars, starting all the way back at their very first season in 1989. And luckily, they've managed to keep the same main cast for the most part throughout the duration of the series, allowing for it to continue relatively unchanged all this time. There have, however, been some hiccups along the way, and some fascinating stories as well, which is why in this video, we're going to discuss some interesting Simpsons voice actor facts you might not know. Actor Leonard Nimoy, best known for playing Mr. Spock in the original Star Trek TV series and many Star Trek films, has popped up on The Simpsons multiple times during its run, through references as well as cameos voicing an animated version of himself. The first episode he was featured in, however, wasn't supposed to have him in it at all. According to Conan O'Brien, who was a writer in the beginning seasons of the show and who wrote episode 71 from season 4, Marge vs. the Monorail, he originally wrote Nimoy's part with Spock's Star Trek co-star George Takei in mind, Captain Sulu from the show, since Conan had met him in person and liked his charisma as well as the sound of his voice. However, Takei turned down the opportunity to do the cameo, much to Conan's surprise, stating that he was on the board of transportation for the city of San Francisco at the time, and as Conan puts it,
I feel this script mocks the monorail.
Which in George Takei's opinion was a valid form of transportation. So the producers then called Leonard Nimoy,
who's better, he outranks Sulu,
and offered him the gig, which he accepted, and this led to him also playing himself in episode 162 from season 8 of the show, The Springfield Files, which had Nimoy narrating a science fiction story surrounding Homer and Mr. Burns. His narration in the episode was a parody of the 70s mystery documentary show he hosted called In Search Of, where he would examine strange phenomenon like the existence of Bigfoot and UFOs. The episode itself was a parody of Fox's other hit show in its 4th season at the time, The X-Files, which, like The Simpsons, was also part of their Sunday primetime lineup. And not only was Nimoy featured, but also animated versions of Agent Mulder and Scully from the Sci-Fi series, with the characters being voiced by their actual live actors, David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. Kelsey Grammer has been the voice of Sideshow Bob on The Simpsons since the character was introduced in the classic 8th episode of the first season, The Telltale Head, although Bob didn't actually speak for the first time on the show until a couple of months later in episode 12, Krusty Gets Busted, where Bart exposes him after he attempts to frame Krusty, leading him to seek revenge on Bart and view him as his enemy throughout many episodes of the show. However, in episode 169 of season 8, cleverly titled Brother from Another Series, we're introduced to Bob's brother Cecil, voiced by David Hyde Pierce, who also played Niles Crane, brother of Kelsey Grammer's character Frasier Crane on the hit NBC sitcom Frasier. Cecil even makes a reference to Niles' wife Maris from the show in the episode,
Guess who?
Maris?
As he's trying to frame and kill Bob, Bart, and Lisa, with Bob actually being the good guy this time. James Earl Jones was largely affiliated with The Simpsons in the early years of the show. He was featured in the landmark episode number 16 from season 2, the very first Treehouse of Horror, not just playing the voice of one character, but multiple, within every segment of the 3-story episode, being the only guest voice actor to have ever done this in the show's history. He can be heard as the voice of the Moving Man in Bad Dream House, the alien Sarek the Preparer in Hungry Are the Damned, and the narrator in The Simpsons' classic take on Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. He also voiced Maggie in Treehouse of Horror 5, episode 109 from season 6, in a scene where an evil version of her exists in an alternate universe. And Jones did a narration at the end of episode 192 from season 9, titled Das Bus, when he explains how the Springfield Elementary School children were saved from an island after being stranded during a field trip gone wrong, which was a Simpsons take on The Lord of the Flies. A tribute to the actor was also made in Round Springfield, episode 125 from season 6, where Lisa sees Bleeding Gums Murphy appear in the clouds after passing away, a reference to The Lion King, which was huge at the time as it had been released less than a year prior. In the scene, Mufasa from Lion King also appears, as does Darth Vader and James Earl Jones himself, saying his famous line,
"This is CNN."
Although none of the characters were voiced by Jones in the scene, but rather show regular Harry Shearer doing his best impression of the iconic actor. Although many celebrities happily lent their voices to The Simpsons throughout its time on air, some have not been so enthusiastic about the idea. One celebrity on that list of those who are too cool for the series, or at least just unwilling to take part in it, unsurprisingly, is Bob Dylan, who was approached by producers multiple times to join the endless list of guest stars. One of their attempts was made for the role of a coyote in episode 162 from season 8, with a Spanish title that I can't pronounce, but it translates to English as The Mysterious Voyage of Homer. In the episode, Homer sees the coyote while hallucinating thanks to an extremely hot bowl of chili. It's considered to be a classic by fans, and even Matt Groening has said it's one of The Simpsons' greatest achievements. During production, the creators had 2 celebrity guest voices in mind for the canine character, the first being Dylan, but since he again turned them down, they reached out to their second choice, legendary folk singer Johnny Cash. And luckily he accepted, because his contribution to the episode is partially what makes it so great. His deep booming voice and the way he speaks coming from the tiny creature and playing off the higher pitched squeal of Homer's voice just worked perfectly together, and I personally can't imagine the episode being as good without Cash's contribution to it. There are a lot of questions surrounding Springfield's most silent but adorable character, Maggie, and one that many fans have is who's responsible for the sound she makes. As for her squishing pacifier, apparently Matt Groening and an animator from back in the Tracy Ullman days created the sounds together before the family even had its own series, and they've continued to use those recordings ever since. As for Maggie's speaking roles, the few she's had on salary. According to an article back then in the LA Times, Maggie had been commuting from Denver to LA to record her lines for 4 years in the late 90s. When the time came to renew her contract, she requested 4 times her previous salary amount, wanting $6,000 per episode rather than her typical $1,500. This was far less than what the rest of the main cast was earning at that point, after renegotiating their salaries in '98, bringing them up to $50K plus per episode, although she did play a significantly smaller role than the rest. According to Roswell, executives offered her only an extra $150 per episode, which she said wouldn't even cover the cost of her travel expenses, so she walked away. When going public with the news that she was quitting, Fox reportedly claimed it was simply because she no longer wanted to commute, making no mention of the financial dispute, and they wrote Maude's character out of the show. But Roswell also voiced other characters like Miss Hoover, Luann Van Houten, and Helen Lovejoy. In fact, hers is the voice behind the famous "Someone Please Think of the Children" line, which has been used in countless memes decades later. Some of her characters were briefly replaced by Marcia Mitzman-Gavin, and some were given non-speaking roles until Maggie returned a few years later in 2002 for season 15, and she's been with the show ever since. In 2019, voice actress Russi Taylor, who voiced the characters Sherry and Terry, as well as Martin Prince in the German exchange student Uter for the duration of the show, and who was also known for voicing other famous characters like Minnie Mouse, passed away at age 75. Rather than writing her characters out of the show and retire them the way they did Miss Krabappel after her voice actress Marsha Wallace passed away in October of 2013, executives chose instead to recast the voices using prominent voice actress Grey DeLisle from late 2019 to current day. In episode 36 from season 3, titled Stark Raving Dad, Homer's committed to a mental institution after a mix-up involving Bart. While in the hospital, he meets another patient named Leon, who claims he's Michael Jackson despite being a tall, heavy-set bald man, with the voice of the character being played by the moonwalking pop star himself, outside of a few singing parts that were sung, and quite well in my opinion, by musician Kip Lennon, since Michael was contractually prevented from singing them himself. Lennon was actually handpicked by Michael for the role and was also used to voice him in the Jackson Family miniseries The Jacksons: An American Dream, which premiered a year later in the fall of 1992. Jackson's role in the show was kept a secret for years and credited to John J. Smith at the end of the episode. According to producer Al Jean, Leon was supposed to return for a follow-up episode, this time being voiced by another iconic pop star, Prince. But the royal one didn't want to take part in the project because he didn't want to play second fiddle to Michael Jackson, who he was known to have been somewhat competitive with throughout their careers. Leon did, however, make a return for a short cameo in episode 626 of season 29, titled Mr. Lisa's Opus, in a flash-forward scene where Bart brings Leon back to once again sing the same birthday song from the initial episode, with Kip Lennon returning to do the voice. Dustin Hoffman also had an uncredited role in the show when he voiced Mr. Bergstrom in episode 36 from season 2 titled Lisa's Substitute. Like Michael Jackson, Hoffman used a pseudonym in the end credits, going under the name Sam Ettick. A reference was made to the two celebrities' part in the series during episode 65 of season 4, titled Itchy and Scratchy the Movie, when after Homer bans Bart from seeing the highly anticipated film, Lisa goes without him and upon returning home from the experience, tells Bart that Dustin Hoffman and Michael Jackson had voice cameos in it, and then says,
"Of course, they didn't use their real names, but you could tell it was them."
It's been said that Hoffman's reason for using a fake name in the credits is because he didn't want the role to hurt his credibility as an actor, since this was when the show was still fairly new, and at the time, few actors as big as him had yet made a guest appearance. So that's it. Do you know any other interesting stories about voice actors from The Simpsons? There's definitely plenty more, so I'm sure most of you do. Let us know in the comments, and thanks for clicking like or subscribing. Feel free to check out the rest of the channel for more Culture Guys content. I'll see you there, and until then, live well and take it easy. Later.